Hello again, it's Mr. Singleton, one of the Associate Directors for Outward Grange, looking at principles of organisation this time. I've actually built two lessons into one because it probably won't take us too long to go through these two lessons. So once again, this is part of the spec from AQA. This is what we have to teach from. This is what they use to help start to build their questions in their exams. So these are the things that you need to know. Cells are the basic building blocks of all living things. A tissue is a group of cells. Organs are aggregations or groups of tissues which perform a function, and then organs will move into, or lots of organs make an organ system, which help to form organisms. So just as a quick starter, this probably doesn't even need to be done on a whiteboard, you can just do this in your head. Smallest to largest with these things, so which one of those things has the smallest number? Well, I'll help you out here. The student is only one thing, so that would be the smallest. And then down to the largest. Now, Outward Grange is the largest out of all of those. So trying to arrange those numbers of organisms or people from smallest to largest. I'll give you a minute, it shouldn't take too long. Okay, so answers. First, you should have the student, which is 1, and then the class, which is usually about 30. Then a year group, which would be about, well, depending which school you're in, you're talking 130 up to 200, 300, and then the academy, the whole school, which is upwards of 1,000, and then the whole trust. All right, that idea is going to be used within this lesson. That's why I've done. Okay, so books. If you're using your book, your title is Principles of Organisation. Make sure you underline that, and this is under the topic B2, which is organisation. It's still in paper 1, but it's just the second topic in there. We finished cells, which was topic 1, and now we're on to organisation, which is topic 2. Right, so on to the challenge and aspire. The challenge for today's lesson, and this will change halfway through, but the first bit is describe why organs are important for multicellular organisms, and then the aspire is explain the importance of organ systems. So a couple of definitions that you need to know. So cells are the basic building blocks of all life. Every living thing that we are aware of is made of a cell or made up of lots of cells. So we call them the first level of organisation. That's the smallest thing that a living thing can be made out of, is a cell. Now, we've talked about prokaryotic cells and eukaryotic cells, and those being parts of life. So a tissue, this is not your Kleenex and the things that you blow your nose on, but in biology, when we talk about a tissue, it's cells which have all grouped together, so they have a similar structure and they have a similar job, which all group together to form something called a tissue. I kind of think about this sometimes as a house, and I think, a cell is the brick, but the wall is then the tissue. So there's lots of those cells all working together, or lots of those bricks all working together to form a function to build that wall. So an example of that, of a tissue in your body, is muscles. I talked about muscle cells last lesson, but in this case, when the muscle cells all combine together, they make muscle tissue. An organ, so an organ is a group of tissues then, so this isn't too difficult. So a cell is the basic thing, a tissue is a group of those cells, and an organ is a group of tissues, so it gets a bit larger now. This is like the year group size that we talked about at the start. So a group of tissues which work together to perform a similar function forms an organ. I've seen this as an AQA exam. Unfortunately, I've seen students also get this wrong. Give an example of a human organ. So you can have anything from a heart, lung, liver, brain, intestines, lots of different organs in your body, eyes, etc. Okay, they're all made up of tissue. So let's just take that first one, the heart. The heart is mainly muscle tissue, but it has some nervous tissue in there. It'll have some connective tissue in there. There's lots of tissues which then form together to make an organ. Another good example is a stomach. That's made up of 3 different types of tissue. You've got a muscle around the stomach, so muscle tissue around the stomach to help churn up your food. You've got something called glandular tissue, which releases that acid in there and protease in there. And then you also have something called epithelial tissue, which protects the stomach from the acid that it's releasing. So it has 3 different types of tissues, and they all work together to make that organ, that stomach. So let's just break this lesson up a little bit. We've done about cells, we've done about tissues, we've done about organs. I want you to try and complete the Google quiz. I will give you 4 minutes. Answer the questions below. Okay, so that is why organs are important. They work together to keep the body functioning. So we've also got to look at these two things, so the organ systems. So this isn't any really more difficult. The organs in your body will organize themselves into organ systems. So they are groups of organs that are performing a specific task for the body. So if you think about all the organs which help you digest food, you've got your stomach, you've got your small intestine, you've got your large intestine, you've got your pancreas, and you've got your liver. All those organs working together will make an organ system. Okay, if you want to relate that to my house analogy, you've got your brick, which is your cell, your wall, which is your tissue, lots of those tissues coming together to make, lots of those cells coming together to make a tissue and make a brick wall. And then you've got your organ, which I would say would be a room, a couple of those walls being put together to make a room. Your organ system would be a couple of rooms coming together to make the bottom floor of your house, let's say. There's lots of different organ systems. So you've got a reproductive system, a nervous system. Okay, you see where I'm going with this. It's always a system at the end of the word to tell you that it is an organ system. And then the final level of organization is an organism. So lots of organ systems working together make an organism. Okay, that's a plant. Please, this is the big thing here. Lots of people think, oh, well, plants don't have all this. Yes, plants obviously do. They are made up of cells, and the cells will come together to make a tissue. So xylem tissue, which is that one that we talked about last lesson, that's moving water. Phloem tissue, moving glucose. You have palisade tissue, okay, and those will come together to form organs. Major organs in the plants, roots, stem, leaf, flower if it's got one, okay, and they will form organ systems, and then an organism, which is the plant, okay. So plants have all of this as well. It's not just animals. So that's the importance of organ systems, and I want you to have a look at this just really quickly and see if you can tell which level of organization these are examples of. Now I'll help you out with the first one. So a sperm, we did last lesson, a sperm is a cell. Okay, and so then go on to kidney, then go on to stomach. Listen, I'm happy if you write in your book A, cell, B, whatever you think it is, C, etc., etc. I'll give you, there's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 15. Shouldn't really take you more than 3 minutes. Off you go. So a sperm is a cell, A kidney is an organ, the stomach is an organ, and the digestive system is an organ system. I've gone through these ones. So muscular, you could have a cell because you could have muscle cell, but it says muscular, so it's tissue, glandular tissue, and you can have epithelial cells and you can have epithelial tissues. Pancreas is an organ, reproductive system is an organ system, the heart is an organ, xylem I will give you if you put cell or tissue, mesophyll, which is part of a plant, is a tissue, red blood cell is a cell, a neuron or a nerve cell is a cell, and then the respiratory system is therefore an organ system. So there's just a bit of a recap with that. On your Google quiz, I think it's about 10 marks, just need to match them up. I'll give you 2 minutes, off you go. Okay, so if you're going to make a revision card on this, it's a nice, quick, easy one. Cell is a building block of life. Tissue, a group of cells which carry out a job. And give yourself an example there, like a muscle. Organ, a group of tissues which carry out a specific job. Example, a heart. And then organ system, a group of organs which carry out a specific job, which would be a respiratory system or a digestive system. Pause the video, or I'll leave it running for 3 minutes if you want to get them written down. Okay, so that really is lesson 1, and we're going to try and get 2 lessons into one. So this is the other part, and it just connects really nicely with this. So it's about animal tissues, organs, and organ systems. And it's mainly around this first bit about the digestive system. You might have done this already in year 7 or in year 8, but we're just going to go through bits and add bits on. So, new title, the human digestive system. Right, so the challenge here is to describe the route of food through the digestive system. So you've got to know the name of all the different organs in the digestive system, and then the aspires to explain what each one of those does. Okay, so right at the end of this, I'm going to ask you to write a description about how a burger that you might have eaten the other day goes through your digestive system. So just keep that in mind, and these are all the important parts. So first thing you do is you put that food, that burger, into your mouth. Now your mouth is brilliant. It does 2 things. It will mechanically digest, and that just means that your teeth will chop up and grind your food into smaller pieces. Now, humans have 2 different types of teeth, well, 3 really, but they have incisors and canines, and they are there to rip food, rip meat, and the back at the back they have molars, which are there to like grind the food down a little bit. So if you look at herbivores, animals which only eat plants, they mainly just have molars everywhere, and they wouldn't have the incisors, etc. And the canine, definitely not. But omnivores or carnivores would have the canines as well. The other thing that's more important is it mixes your food with saliva. Now, saliva actually starts to break down some of the food groups in your food. So it breaks down carbohydrates using something called an enzyme. Now, we will come back to enzymes as a required practical on enzymes, and we will talk about how they work. But at the moment, you just need to know that it's an enzyme, this little protein that can break down molecules, and this one is called amylase. The other thing that saliva does do is it just makes it easier for food to go down your throat, in this case down your esophagus. So mouth, 2 things it does: mechanical digestion, but more importantly, it releases saliva, and that makes an enzyme called amylase, which starts to break down carbohydrates. It gets from your mouth, it goes into your esophagus. Yes, that is the correct spelling of esophagus. And it moves down this pipe. Basically, that's all it is, a little pipe. And it moves down by muscular contractions. It's called peristalsis. You don't really need to know that, but it's just a bit interesting how it gets down there. And it goes into the stomach. So this is your stomach, a massive part of your digestive system. Basically, what happens is it starts to mix up all of your food. And in your stomach, there is another enzyme called protease, and that protease breaks down proteins. Not many people forget that one because of the prot and the prot in both words. So protease is the enzyme that breaks down proteins. Also in your stomach, you have stomach acid, okay? And you have to know the name of that acid. It's hydrochloric acid. It's actually the most common used acid in our science labs in school. So that acid, and be careful with this one, that acid is there to kill any microorganisms, any bacteria or any viruses that might be on your food. And that acid is also there to help the protease work. What the acid does not do is break down your food. Okay, please be careful. That's a really common misconception that students have. The acid doesn't break down the food, but it does kill harmful microorganisms, and it does help the protease to work. You could add, if you wish, that protease breaks down proteins into these little things called amino acids. What you've got to remember through all of this, the whole point of the digestive system is that when you eat something, all of that food needs to get into your bloodstream, but the molecules are way too big to fit through into your bloodstream. So we have to break them down. So the whole point of the digestive system is take that big molecule, which you can't get into your bloodstream, and make it more soluble so it can travel into your bloodstream and get to where it needs to go. Okay, so after this, we will have a quiz. So just breaking it up a bit for you again, questions about the mouth, esophagus, and the stomach. I'll give you 2.5 minutes. Off you go. Okay, you got 30 more seconds. Okay, so after the stomach, we go into, or the food goes into the small intestines. Now, the small intestines, although it says the word small in it, that's only talking about the diameter of it, are actually really long, around about 9 feet. Okay, so that is much bigger than you are, much bigger than I am, and they're all just compacted together to make a really large surface area in the small intestine. This is where most of that digestion, once it's all broken down, it will actually travel into your bloodstream. Now, before it can do that, we have to break down some of the fats. Now, fats are given a bit of a scientific name. They are given the word name lipid. So lipase or lipase is the enzymes that break down fats, and that happens in the small intestine. The other thing that happens in the small intestine, you've got all that acidic food from the stomach being entered into the small intestine. Eventually, it's going to wear away the small intestine and you're going to die quite quickly. So instead of that happening, your body releases something called bile, and bile neutralizes that fat. And it also helps lipase or fats to be broken down. So it helps the lipase to work, or it helps the fats to be broken down. Okay, bile, really important, but we will come back to it because it's so important. Small intestine, mainly you get some more lipid digestion, some more carbohydrate digestion, and it all gets absorbed into your bloodstream. Now, the small intestine is helped by having these things called villi. So villi are these little folded parts of your small intestine. It just increases surface area. And even on top of that villi are little smaller little lumps called microvilli, and they really increase this area, the surface area of the small intestine, so you absorb as much nutrients as possible and get it into your bloodstream. Okay, so villi, microvilli are both just there to increase the surface area, so you absorb as much nutrients as possible. Then it's on to the large intestine, and hopefully by that time you have taken out all the nutrients that you possibly can, and all that remains is all the waste products and the water. Now, so the water needs to be reabsorbed into the blood, so that then that you can keep that water and use it. If you ever get any infections and you end up with diarrhea, that's where the water is not being taken out. So the infection's usually in the large intestine, and the large intestine doesn't work as well, which then means that you get diarrhea instead of holding all that water in. And just another one, this is just a little useful note. There's an appendix on the large intestine, and that was used by animals which we evolved from to digest cellulose. So we would have been able to go to a tree and eat the leaves and digest it all and take the cellulose out of it. That is now in humans. We don't use that anymore. So if you ever get appendicitis, they'll just take your appendix out because you don't need it. So these two have not been mentioned because they're not really, the food doesn't go through these, but these two have a massive important part to play. You've got the liver and the pancreas. So the liver is the thing that produces bile. It goes into something called the gallbladder and then gets released. And remember that bile is there to neutralize your acid coming out of the stomach and also to help the digestion of lipids or fats. The pancreas is the thing that makes all of these enzymes. So it releases three enzymes. These are the three enzymes you need to know. You need to know protease, which breaks down proteins, carbohydrates or amylase, which breaks down carbohydrates, and lipase, which breaks down fats. But there will be a lesson on that. Don't worry too much. Okay, so that is the end of the digestive system. I want you to go back to your Google quiz and finish off those questions that are about the digestive system. I'll give you 4 minutes. got 1 more minute. Okay, so what I want you to do is write a description of how a burger goes through your mouth and then will come out through the last bit, actually, which I've not mentioned, which is your anus as poo. So what is the route of digestion for that burger? Try and add those names of enzymes if you can, and where they're released. I'll give you 5 minutes. It's normally like a 5 or 6 mark question. Try and include all of those organs and what each organ does. Go back if you need to, look through your notes if you need to. I'll give you 5 minutes. Off you go. So hopefully you've got through to the mouth and you've named an enzyme there. And then it goes down the tube into a bigger organ which churns up the food, and it has acid in it. And it also has an enzyme in there. And then after that it goes into one of the intestines. Think about which intestines first and what that does, and which enzyme will break down lipids. And then you need to think about where it goes after that. It's another intestine and what happens in that intestine. And then if you can add what the liver and the pancreas do, then you've done a great job. You've got 1 more minute. Okay, so leave that in your book and your teacher can mark it. So just quick plenary. There are 9 parts of the digestive system. I just want to see if you can name those parts. So just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 in your book, and then try to label them. Off you go. Okay, let's go through these answers. So number 1 was the mouth, and it then goes into the esophagus, which was number 2. Then it goes into the stomach. Then it goes into the small intestine. Then into the large intestine. And then there's 2 parts here. There is the anus and then the rectum. The rectum's first, it kind of stores feces or poo, and then it comes out through your anus. And then you have the pancreas, which is number 8, which is just behind the stomach, and then the liver, which is number 9. So if you're making a revision card, these are the bits that I put down. These are the bits for that are really key for you. It also has, sometimes the common question is, what is digestion? So a good idea to have breaking down large molecules into small soluble molecules. And then those are all the key parts for you. I'll give you 5 minutes. Again, if you want to pause the video, you can pause the video and add those bits in, but they'll just help you. Okay, so there is another Google Doc attached, which is just the exam questions. Please have a go at them, hand them in to your teacher, get them marked, see how you get on with the actual questions. Well done.